Many dimensions intersect with their own, several of which are 2D planes. When two or more planes intersect, they form corners. Entities in the intersecting planes cannot perceive each other. They exist separately, in their own worlds. However, the corner folk can pass these boundaries and enter other planes. The corner folk are a trans-dimensional species. They are the only ones who can traverse the corners shaped by planes. Coincidentally, I believe that the corners of my own home align with several planes, for I have seen the corner folk in action, crossing the corners from one reality to another. This leap requires massive amounts of energy that, when released, produces bright blue flashes. I have yet to discover the source of this energy, and the reason behind the cornerfolk crossings remains unknown. While I was at work, my cameras captured up to 12 cornerfolk huddling in the doorway. I used to think that they had to cross dimensions quickly, but the new footage has proven otherwise. When I'm not around, they take a break from traveling and exhibit micro-movements similar to dreaming animals. They must feel safe in these corners, which suggests that the corner folk's own home is made of similar structures. I imagine that their corner world is made of many plane intersections, allowing them to move freely without using up any energy. My photographs show that smaller corner folk have odd impressions on their skin, as though they have been pressed against many plane intersections at once. The corners likely belong to a nursery or a crib in their homeworld. A multitude of corners placed in close proximity could be used to secure the infant from leaving the corner world. Perhaps they only cross corners in search of food, the same way we only leave our homes for resources. The corner world may be used to raise young, while my own house's corners serve as rest stops of sorts during their journeys. I've begun to dream of the corner world. I can't stop thinking about it. According to the calendar, I've spent entire weeks in my home, just drawing and describing the corner world on paper. I lost my job last month due to repeated absences, but it really does feel like I just left the office this afternoon. When the corner folk jump, it feels as though they're taunting me. But I'm close to a solution. Regardless of whether my body survives the forces of the corner world or not, this much is certain. The fear of my own destruction will not prevent my entry.
qu'étaient les piédestals, une que le statut soit destiné à être un cadeau. L'ambassadeur des États-Unis nous a exhortés à suivre les démons du président Trump. Nous avons accepté l'échappement. Nous avons reçu des exigences de taille variable pour piédestal. Après 4 ans de demander des modifications de la taille du piédestal ont cessé. Les gens se demandent pourquoi le piédestal est tellement plus grand que les dames. Tout ce que je leur dis, c'est demander aux Américains.
Ellie Island era orribile. L'intero posto puzzava di carne, come un mattatoio. C'erano anche uccelli morti ovunque e mia sorella ne trovò persino uno nel gabinetto. Se già la costa è così, diceva mio padre, immaginate quanto puzzeranno le città. Ricordo di aver sentito altre famiglie dire quasi scherzosamente che volessero tornare a Milano per via dell'odore. La mia famiglia aveva spruzzato profumo e acceso candele per tenere lontano il fetore, ma funzionava solo per un'ora o giù di lì, finché l'aria diventava di nuovo insopportabile. Le serate erano così calde, rimasi per lo più sveglia, anche se il resto della mia famiglia dormiva profondamente. Ricordo che guardavo fuori dalla finestra ogni notte e vedevo figli di persone che venivano condotte alla Statua della Libertà dai funzionari. Se solo fossero saliti sul piedistallo, i funzionari se ne sarebbero andati e non sarebbe successo nient'altro. La mattina seguente però ci sarebbe stato un odore peggiore, come un mattatoio.
During a program of ABC Evening News, anchor Peter Jennings told viewers to look forward to next week for a special broadcast of national significance. Jennings would continue to remind viewers of the special broadcast over the next 7 nights, even referring to it at one point as the most unprecedented announcement in recent history. A week after its first mention, Jennings reminded viewers of the special broadcast one last time, asking them to pay attention later that night for an exclusive look at the greatest gift to the American people. Due to the anticipation built over the week, over 60 million Americans tuned into ABC, waiting for the evening news to end and for the special broadcast to begin. There were countless theories as to what would occur, from the announcement of alien life to the declaration of an all-out nuclear war. Speculation was brewing intensely. Once the evening news program ended, a black screen with a 10-second countdown commenced with the title Dean Democracy. Some viewers, so terrified of the threat of nuclear war, reportedly experienced nervous breakdowns and ran down the street, declaring that Dean Democracy was the code name for an all-out nuclear holocaust. Yet once the countdown ended, all fears were soon replaced with tears of joy and an excitement not seen since the end of World War II.
What are we waiting for? Let's bring them back home.
In the seconds following James Dean's presidential announcement, hundreds of thousands of neighborhoods erupted into celebration. Although other candidates had promised to end the Vietnam War, none had so accurately expressed the same anger that they had felt, which Dean had perfectly conveyed in a 15-second broadcast. Due to popular demand, the ABC Evening News was canceled the next night, replaced by a 30-minute loop of James Dean's presidential announcement. The broadcast was watched again by over 38 million Americans, and the parties continued for the rest of the week. Due to repeated assassination attempts on Robert Kennedy, the Democratic Party presidential debates were canceled for the 1968 election season. However, this proved to be no issue for Dean, as polls indicated that he was in the lead for the entirety of 1967 and 1968, despite having had fewer public appearances and rallies than any other candidate. The strength of his campaign relied on the powerful advertisements he directed that would air every Friday evening on ABC. The series of programs would be considered by many as another weekly TV series, and went on to become the highest-rated TV show on television after the conclusion of Star Trek in 1967. Although a presidential debate was eventually scheduled 2 weeks before the election, James Dean instead invited opponent Richard Nixon to a track to race cars on the same night. Although reluctant at first, Nixon eventually agreed and went to spend the entire day with Dean, reportedly even telling the actor, "To hell with it, I'm voting for you. You're already a better president than I'll ever be." This statement, although only a rumor, would spread like wildfire in tabloids and permanently curbed Nixon's chance for victory. On the morning of November 1st, 1968, 4 days before Election Day, anti-Dean groups hijacked radio channels and told civilians they were fed up with James Dean and that television was ruining American youth. After the broadcast, the groups went on to cut hundreds of power lines in the southeast, effectively preventing any of Dean's presidential ads from reaching any household below Tennessee. Dean quickly heard of the incident, and despite the risk of an assassination, flew down to the south and quickly went to work with local electricians to repair the broken power lines. James Dean would be met with a supportive crowd, primarily younger voters who were eager to see a younger face back in the White House. Elderly white conservatives, often the parents of the younger supporters, remained in their houses and occasionally peered through their window blinds to catch a glimpse of the handsome candidate. Although it wasn't known to Dean at the time, hate groups in the South had perpetuated the idea that he was Satan in disguise, and cited his good looks and his love for jazz as being clear signs of the devil.
James Dean is no man.
Elderly white conservatives in the Southeast would be the only demographic unfazed by his campaign, yet Dean continued to travel from state to state, repairing power lines for 4 days straight until the very morning of the election. On November 5, 1968, James Dean received 75% of the popular vote with 395 electoral votes. Nixon congratulated Dean in a phone call the following morning, but Dean refused to acknowledge the win and instead asked to race cars again at the track. On January 20, 1969, James Dean held his inaugural address at the official Capitol Raceway. Although presidents in the past had speeches that were typically around 20 minutes, Dean spoke for less than a minute.
I have a speech, and it has the flotsam that you people expect to hear. But that's not fair. No, that's not fair at all. I'm here for all of you. It's only fair that you speak for yourselves. My words shouldn't be louder than yours. So I brought many other guests to speak. They're just people like you and I. In the same time that many other presidents have spoken by themselves, America will speak. Thank you.
Dean proceeded to introduce many groups to the microphone, including civil rights activists and Native American families. Martin Luther King Jr. would also come forward to speak in his first appearance since an attempt on his life 9 months prior. President Dean would conclude the inauguration with a brief bongo performance and went on to race Richard Nixon at the track. In subsequent presidential inaugurations, those who disagreed with the elected president would instead celebrate Dean Democracy Day and protested by watching Dean's unique take on the address in place of the actual one. In a televised address, President Dean planned to inform Americans of his first 90 days in office. However, 6 seconds into the broadcast, the audio cut out and remained absent for the remainder of the speech. Although anti-Dean groups claimed responsibility and took pride in the sabotage, many civilians claimed that it benefited the president. The silent broadcast highlighted President Dean's sincere facial expressions and lively disposition, as opposed to the stern and stiff personalities of prior administrations. Viewers were proud to see a man in his prime at the most important position in the country. Ironically, President Dean's popularity grew after the technical difficulty, and film director Stanley Kubrick went on to call the broadcast the greatest silent film ever made.
was a Lincoln Looker for 2 weeks. It was terrifying. One moment you're at home answering the door, and the next you're stuck in some kind of suit. The smell was awful in there, and the metal seat was so cold. The only thing you can do is look through 2 little holes. It was some kind of mask, and whenever the sun shined near, I could see the inside of it. It was a familiar face. Every few nights, straws would be put through the holes, and someone would feed me some weird soup. After 2 weeks, they found out that they had misidentified me, and I wasn't the correct Lincoln Looker. Reagan apologized to me personally, and I was released with some monetary compensation. They don't care if I talk about it or not. No one would take me seriously. Lincoln looking is just too absurd.
There's always that someone that we dislike more than everyone else. Not usually famous or important, but they've done something that's affected us personally. Often you're the only person who remembers this act. It may not have been that bad, but memory hurts. Everyone experiences this, and the president is no exception. Except he can do something about it. Every president can choose one person to be a Lincoln Looker. After their alibi is fabricated, the person is abducted from their home, and they stay a Lincoln Looker for as long as the president sits in office. Nobody can question his decision, and there's no trial. You might be surprised, but it's nothing new. It's been a tradition. Lincoln Lookers have been around for a very long time.
Hello, we are not available now. Please leave your name and phone number after the beep. We will return your call.
Hey, Eunice. It's Howard. I don't know what I just saw. I was at the top of the steps, reading the inscriptions and talking to visitors, when I started to hear a faint scratching sound. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I got close to the chair, I realized that the scratching was coming from inside the marble. So I went to a guard and asked whether she could do anything about animals that could be trapped in there. She told me not to worry about it, and that they'd take care of it once there were fewer visitors. A few minutes passed, and the scratching became much louder. I went back to the guard and asked what kind of animals usually got stuck in there, and she said, wild animals. The sound started to make visitors anxious. I remember one boy was pulling so hard at his mother's hand, begging to leave. A blind girl with one of those canes went up to the chair and pressed her head against it to listen. Then she started crying. Her parents tried to pull her away, but she just began to hit the chair with her cane. That's when the guards asked everyone to go back down the steps. I don't know why, and it's going to sound crazy, but I felt compelled to help. So I went to the blind girl and joined her in hitting the marble. The guards tried to pin us down, but the scratching became too loud for even them. It sounded like someone was shaving down a chalkboard. Eventually the marble began to crack, and a few more hits caused the crevice to expand all the way to the top of the chair. There was a sudden burst of air from the damage, and the head suddenly turned toward us. I was afraid it would fall, so I picked the girl up and went down a few steps. The head slowly rotated back into place, and when it started to be pushed upwards, I took out my camera. It was no wild animal.
forest fell swiftly as the lumberjack swung, except for the special tree, which could not be stung. She missed her friends and the hymns they sung, so she started a tune that broke the man's lung.
An accidental discovery made by two fishermen has sent shockwaves across the nation. Around 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve, Ralph Grassman and Michael Tillon were reeling in the last batch of catfish when something on the ice caught their eye. It looked like a bicorn, one of those hats from way back when, said Grassman, the others of the two who had also organized the trip. Grassman walked down the ice to retrieve the hat. When he pulled back the hat from the ice, he tumbled back in shock at the sight of a human scalp, partially exposed in the ice. Tillon walked over and after a brief discussion with Grassman, agreed to remove the rest of the body from the ice. The effort took several hours, but by 10 p.m. the fishermen were able to pull the entire body from the ice with no further damage. Although both men had presumed that the individual was already dead for some time, Tim exclaimed in shock when he reportedly saw the individual's eyelid twitch. Grassman suggested to immediately take the body home in an attempt to revive the frozen man. They proceeded to carry it back to Grassman's apartment. They laid the body in a full bathtub, gradually raising the water's temperature throughout the night to prevent shock. Grassman claims to have learned this technique from a pulp magazine he had read as a child. At 2 a.m. the following morning, Tillon claimed that an individual briefly regained consciousness and shouted, "Victory or death," while Grassman rested in the living room. By 7 a.m. the frozen individual appeared to have relapsed into a deep coma, which prompted Grassman to phone the local authorities. When asked why he hadn't called medical personnel earlier, Grassman told reporters that he didn't want to risk the lives of the first responders, who had been driving on slippery roads in the dark. Shortly after being phoned, paramedics arrived and rushed the frozen man to the Delaware State Hospital. Throughout the experience, both fishermen thought the individual's face seemed vaguely familiar. It was only when Tillon pulled out a dollar bill that the connection was fully made. When we first dug him out, we moved his clothes so that we could carry him more easily. The clothes weighed a ton because they were completely frozen over. But I bet if we saw the clothes without ice, then we could have no doubt that we dug out George Washington. Although Delaware State Hospital has declined to comment on the identity and the condition of the man, Grassman brought the bicorn hat from the previous day to the Delaware History Museum, where historians confirm to be an authentic piece from the 18th century. The validation raised more questions than answers, as further research revealed that no Washington reenactors or artifacts have been reported missing. Grassman believes that the man he dug out from the ice is the true George Washington, and that the former president had become gravely ill while crossing the Delaware River. Grassman claims that the imminent death of Washington could have been devastating to the war effort, so his condition was likely kept secret by having a double acting as the president until 1797. When asked for an explanation to why the body had been found so far from the site of the battle, Grassman replied, "He either drifted away or his men purposely planted it far away so that no one could find it." During Saturday's morning press conference, President Dean shared his thoughts on the discovery in 2 words: "I'm surprised."
During the first winter of the center's construction, the workers set up a Christmas tree just outside the entrance. It was an uncanny sight to see a green fir stand in the middle of what appeared to be a no-man's land. But this tree, humbly ordained with strings of cranberries, buttons, and tin cans, greatly affected me. It demonstrated that even in the darkest of times, the American people will light the beacons of hope. I thought it could be the start of a great and inspiring tradition, so I traveled north to Babylon in search of a Christmas tree for the following year.
For 12 days and 12 nights, Mr. Rockefeller looked for the best tree in the forest. "How about this one, Mr. Rockefeller?" "No, no, it's much too short." How about this one, Mr. Rockefeller? No, no, it's much too tall. How about this one, Mr. Rockefeller? No, no, it's much too average. Mr. Rockefeller soon feared that he would leave empty-handed. Then, on the 12th night, just as he was packing up his stuff, Mr. Rockefeller heard the sweetest tune in the air. It sounded as though the very wind itself had fallen in love. He and his men followed the song and found themselves at the base of a very, very special tree. How about this one, Mr. Rockefeller? It's perfect. For the rest of the night, the men swung their axes at the special tree. Chop, chop, chop. However, when the sun rose, the tree was still standing. Their axes had left no marks at all. Mr. Rockefeller was surprised. The next day, Mr. Rockefeller and his men laid 100 sticks of dynamite around the tree. 3, 2, 1, boom! Yet, the special tree continued to stand. Mr. Rockefeller was surprised. So Mr. Rockefeller decided to hire the best team of grave diggers to take the tree out of the ground. After a week of digging, they told Mr. Rockefeller, "The tree will be out in 3 years at this rate." Mr. Rockefeller was surprised, but he decided to let the grave diggers work. He would pick the next 3 best trees for the next 3 Christmases. But by the 4th year, the special tree was ready to display.
For the last 2 years, I have seldom mentioned the tragedy that occurred at the center. Many have taken offense at my silence, claiming it to be the result of a desensitization to workplace accidents. Indeed, I have seen enough accidents for 3 lifetimes, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened at the center. For some time now, my friends have blamed the center's original construction workers for the tragedy, since it was their very own Christmas tree that had started the whole tradition. But the truth is that their tree brought joy and wonder to the public. It was my tree, and my tree alone, that brought about the unprecedented loss.
On a cold December morning in Midtown Manhattan, Rockefeller's men slowly raised the special tree. Heave ho! Heave ho! Heave ho! By the afternoon, the special tree stood tall and still. It was unlike any other tree, having no color, branches, or leaves. The mayor of New York, Mr. Guardia, thought that the tree was too bare and asked for branches to be added so that ornaments could be hung. Mr. Rockefeller didn't agree. He thought the tree was perfect, just the way it was. But since Mayor Guardia had been one of his best friends, Mr. Rockefeller told his men to glue some branches on. I, Virginia, watched as the men placed branches on the special tree. I had saved my money for over 9 months to purchase a little star ornament because I wanted to be the very first person to decorate the Rockefeller Christmas tree. It laid in my pocket while I watched, because I planned to hang my ornament as soon as the tree was standing. After the final branch had been added and all the men left, I quickly ran up to the tree. But to my astonishment, the lowest branch of the tree was over twice my height. I jumped as high as I could, but still, the lowest branch was out of my reach. I was very disappointed. I wanted to be the very first person to decorate the tree, but now I had no chance. Unless I called my friends. At once, I began counting my friends on my fingers. There was Helen, Charles, Elizabeth, Alice, Joseph, Elsie, Orville, Edith, Olive, and Philip. 10 friends that I could ask for help. Then I realized that 10 friends standing on each other's shoulders could put me at the very top of the Christmas tree. My star could be the first and the tallest. Without a second to spare, I ran from door to door asking for help. Knock, knock, knock. Helen, are you there? Knock, knock, knock. Charles, are you there? Knock, knock, knock. Elizabeth, are you there? Eventually, I gathered all 10 of my friends at the bottom of the Rockefeller Christmas tree. I told them my plan, to have them all stand on each other and form a ladder for me to climb to the top. My friends understood my excitement, and they quickly started to climb onto each other's shoulders. Ow! Helen had stepped on Charles' fingers. Ow! Charles had stepped on Elizabeth's fingers. Ow! Elizabeth had stepped on Alice's fingers. After many groans and tumbles, my friends formed a sturdy ladder, and I began to climb. My joy grew with every passing face, and before I knew it, I was at the very top, looking down at the tree. My ladder of friends swayed back and forth, and occasionally felt like it was about to collapse. But I tuned out the movement and focused on the tree. Closer, friends, closer. Then I secured the metal star at the top of the tree. It was perfect. Hooray! Victory! I'm the first! Just then, there was a strange sound. The tree began to shake. Its glued branches fell off all at once, and the entire tree slowly bent backwards. Soon, the very top of it touched the ground, forming a perfect arc. It was like a very strange rainbow. My heart sank as I saw my star gently slide to the ground from the tree's top. Bolts of lightning then shot out from inside the arc of the tree, producing thunderous booms. The lightning scared my friends and me. We all tumbled to the ground and ran in all directions, but the lightning caught up to us. I was blinded by a great white light. I remember when my eyes adjusted, I was in a field of special trees, and I saw... In a flash, I returned to the street where my friends and I had been struck by the lightning. We were all on the ground, being attended to by other people. I had scratched my legs badly, and I could see that my friends were also hurt. I looked up at the Rockefeller buildings, and I thought that they looked a little different. The whole street looked a little different, and the special tree was nowhere in sight.
It is only natural for the reader at this point to wonder why the incident has been referred to as a tragedy. There had been no loss of life, and, aside from a few temporary scorch marks on the center, no damage to the surrounding property. I, too, assumed it was a mostly inconsequential event, likely an electrical accident whose effects were exaggerated by the children at the scene. I was grateful that every life involved had been spared. A death at the center would have weighed heavily on my mind for some time. But when I encountered the results of the children's medical examinations, I wished that a death had occurred in place of the unfathomable.
Visited me at the hospital, but they looked completely different. Ma looked worried. After she wiped her tears, she asked, "Did you hang your bear at the Rockefeller tree?" I answered, "It wasn't a bear. I was going to hang a star." To which they asked, "What do you mean?" Pa asked, "Where did you get these clothes?" I answered, "These are my clothes, the ones you helped me put on this morning." To which they asked, "What do you mean?" My ma then asked, "Why are there dots all over your face?" I answered, "Those are my freckles. I've had them since I was little." To which they asked, "What do you mean?" My parents quietly left my bed and talked to my friends' parents. Then they all started to cry and yell. The nurses made them leave, which made me feel better. None of us thought that our real parents had visited, but they all did feel familiar. Orville and Philip were especially shaken. They didn't even share the same last name with their parents. The nurses tried to convince us that those who had visited us were our parents, and that we would come around to properly greet them after we healed. But it was hard to believe. Whenever I looked out the window, I saw that Manhattan looked different from memory. Mr. Rockefeller himself was kind enough to visit us in the hospital. He asked us whether we were okay, and then after some time, he and the nurses began to ask us some very easy questions about American history. With every reply, they would chuckle and shake their heads, until I told Mr. Rockefeller who I thought he was. He chuckled at first, and then became silent, as if the simple fact had deeply affected him. He had asked all my friends a few more questions about himself, and with each answer, he seemed a little more scared. Mr. Rockefeller quietly stood with the nurses for a while, before he wished us a Merry Christmas and left. That evening, the nurses took x-rays of us to make sure we hadn't broken our ribs. Usually, those taking the x-rays are more than happy to show their patients what the pictures looked like. But when I asked to see them, the nurses ignored me. I didn't fall asleep that night. I kept my ear close to the wall to hear what the nurses were saying next door. I heard one sentence over and over. "Everything's backwards." I wonder what they meant by that. I never told my friends, because I didn't want to scare them. But I spent the rest of the night with my hand to my chest, wondering if my heart was ever on the right side.
For several weeks, the children were kept under observation at the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. I visited them as soon as I had the chance to. All the families of these children were deeply unsettled, for they had all independently come to the conclusion their child had been replaced by a doppelganger. They claimed that these new sons and daughters possessed substantial differences from their real children. The majority of differences involved altered physical attributes and the inability to recognize familiar locations and characters, such as their parents and their homes. Two boys even claimed to have names different to those that their mothers had given them at birth. But of all the discrepancies, the most bizarre was their faulty recollections of notable persons and events. For instance, each of the affected children claimed that I had become the wealthiest man in America through an oil monopoly. It is common knowledge that I did indeed work at an oil refinery in my youth, but to entirely deny my 2 terms as president and insist instead that I had always been a mere philanthropist struck me as being particularly odd. The families were agonized by the children's behavior. Some continued to search for their real children. I support their endeavors, for I do not believe that the children's afflictions were the result of hysteria. Every day, I find myself recollecting the day that I had selected the tree. I have since realized The difficulties involved in the removal of it should have repeatedly discouraged me. And had I been discouraged, the families of those children would not be experiencing the anguish that they currently have. Perhaps I never had the opportunity to select another tree. Perhaps I was meant to select that tree regardless of my persistent character. Perhaps we are all trolleys, forced to follow the path of the track to each of our destinations. I take solace in that thought. Or perhaps the tree chose me.
Aprile. Gli schizzi di Papino della Libertà sono stupendi. Lei assomiglia alla mamma se fosse una regina. Ho chiesto a Papino se potesse fare una statua che mi somigliasse. Ha detto sì. 10 aprile. Oggi Papino è andato al suo studio. Gli ho chiesto se avesse già iniziato a lavorare alla mia statua ed ha continuato a sorridermi. Io credo di sì. Papino è molto gentile. 13 aprile. Non abbiamo avuto notizie di papà per un po' di giorni. È già successo in passato, dato che è solito lavorare al suo studio per tanto tempo, ma la mamma oggi era molto preoccupata. È andata nel suo studio dopo avermi messo a letto. 15 aprile. Mamma è tornata a casa stanotte. È andata dritta verso la sua stanza. 16 aprile. Oggi è venuto l'ispettore. Ci ha chiesto di Papino e poi è andato nella stanza della mamma. Un paio di momenti dopo sono arrivati più uomini. Mamma stava piangendo. Continuava a gridare: lei ha i suoi occhi, lei ha i suoi occhi. Ero spaventata. Sono scappata via dalla casa. 18 aprile. Ricordo Papino dire alla mamma come la statua sarebbe stata messa in una nave chiamata Monarch. Sono andata al porto e l'ho trovata ancorata là vicino. Accanto alla nave c'erano alcune scatole. Parti della libertà erano in ciascuna di esse. Mi sono intrufolata in una scatola che era vuota. Spero che venga mandata dove sta Papino. Sento il suo spirito vicino alla libertà. 21 aprile. Sono molto affamata. Le scatole sono legate con una corda, quindi non posso uscire da sola. C'è un forte rumore nella stanza, come dell'argilla trascinata per il pavimento. Posso sentire le corde che vengono tagliate e qualcosa di grosso uscire da una scatola. È Papino? Ci sono molti altri suoni, come legno che si rompe. Dato che le corde sono rotte, sono uscita in fretta dalla scatola ed ho trovato del pane e della frutta nella stanza accanto. Mi sono sbagliata. Non è Papino, ma ha i suoi occhi. 24 aprile. Ho paura di entrare di nuovo nella scatola. Ieri ha fatto suoni più rumorosi. Mentre cercavo per del cibo, credo che mamma mi abbia vista. La scatola è l'unico posto per nascondersi. Le corde continuano ad essere rotte da quella cosa con gli occhi di Papino. Ho paura che quella cosa o quell'uomo possano aprire la mia scatola. Non scriverò più molto, perché ho paura di fare rumore. Scriverò nuovamente quando arriverò sulla terraferma. 29 aprile. La cosa con gli occhi di papà oggi mi ha presa. Mi ha tenuta mentre correva attraverso la giungla. La sua spada ha tagliato centinaia di alberi. Non ho potuto vedere molto nel buio, ma ho potuto vedere gli occhi di papà fissarmi da quelle palpebre metalliche. Siamo scesi giù per un buco e in una grotta profonda. Dopo avermi messo a terra, ha acceso un fuoco colpendo le sue braccia contro delle pietre. Ormai è da ore che affila la sua spada con le rocce, ma non ho mai guardato la lama. Oggi, sin da quando ho iniziato a scrivere, la cosa con gli occhi di Papino ha fissato me.
«19 aprile. 6 casse sono state caricate all'alba. Sono pesanti. Ciascuna di esse contiene una parte di una grossa scultura. 29 aprile. Siamo a Terra di Gibraltar all'alba. La nave ci ha messo ore per approdare nel porto. C'erano molti buchi neri postiglio. Ciascuno di essi ha permesso ad enormi quantità d'acqua di entrare. Senza il catrame saremmo affondati in 3 giorni. Abbiamo aperto le casse per gli ufficiali della dogana. Le casse erano vuote. 30 morning of April 29th, we received numerous reports regarding a tremendous force that rushed up the rock, which tore down hundreds of trees and created several landslides throughout the previous night. One civilian likened the phenomena to the work of a gigantic crazed fella. Due to the sheer number of reports and the high level of concern in the surrounding community, I deployed myself along with 13 officers to the rock in search of an explanation. We discovered that there was indeed a newly forged trail through the dense foliage stretching almost the entire height of the rock. The trail was astonishingly linear, with no bends in the path. The cuts to the trees themselves were precise. The downed trees continued to be warm to the touch, presumably due to the extreme speed of this force. A few fires present along the trail were extinguished by fellow officers as we traversed the rock. The path ended at a large crevice in the ground, which looked to be an entrance to a large underground cavern. After requesting additional men and equipment, Officer Hadley descended into the crevice. It was not long until Hadley exclaimed in fright and urged us all to enter. Within the following hour, the majority of us were in the cavern, which appeared to be an undiscovered offshoot of St. Michael's Cave. In the middle of the location stood a plaster model of a tall Greco-Roman statue of a woman. Surrounding this sculpture were the splayed remains of an individual, flattened like a set of clothes. A hollowed-out torso was stretched a quarter of the way up the statue, the sight of which compelled a few of the officers to exit the cavern. The human remains were collected and sent to the morgue, while the sculpture was cleaned and lifted out. The statue's blade, held in its right hand, matched the cuts present on the downed trees. Despite the fantastical implications of this detail, the Gibraltar police force officially concludes that the work of the crazed fella was nothing more than the result of heavy winds. During a secondary investigation, a journal was discovered in the cavern. A translation of its Italian text is in progress.
Arrives the tight-knit wooden ship. The plaster body is absent. Instead, a tall, wounded woman sleeping in its vessel, donning a helmet wrapped in a robe, clutching a sword and a damaged shield. Overheard a conversation with the captain, a violent conflict with freedom at the port in Gibraltar. They tell me inside her is the plaster, and I walk away, silently believing freedom craved liberation so terribly she tried to take it for herself. But off the ship, she was dragged away. Freedom locked up. Freedom in chains. They tell me I have to take it out of her. So hook, rope, peel, and pull. When it was done, freedom stood motionless. Freedom stood still. I see the final bronze woman, and I feel as if, maybe even hope, she is only dormant now and will awaken again.